11 black celebrities who were mob bosses you never knew about. The dazzling stage lights often create a picture-perfect illusion, blinding us to the chilling truths lurking backstage. Behind the glamorous facade of Hollywood's elite lies an earth-shattering secret few dare to confront. For many iconic black celebrities, street gangs weren't merely criminal syndicates. They were a desperate survival strategy against invisible walls and racial prejudices. This was a merciless game where diving into the underworld was a matter of life or death. Today we shatter this golden illusion to expose 11 legendary black stars who were deeply entangled in violent crime. Trust me, these untold stories will permanently alter how you view your idols. Sammy Davis Jr. The 1950s American entertainment industry was never a meritocracy. It was a rigged chessboard designed to keep black artists as disposable pawns. The systemic blade of racial prejudices dictated that even an absolute powerhouse like Sammy Davis Jr. couldn't walk through the front doors of the very Las Vegas casinos he repeatedly sold out. Beneath the dazzling stage lights, fame's crushing pressure forced him into a desperate survival strategy, aligning his career with the ruthless Las Vegas and New York mafia. For this revered Rat Pack icon, mob bosses like Sam Giancana weren't just criminal overlords. They were the only viable shield against the violent, invisible punishment inflicted by aggressive racist groups of the era. But this dark protection came with an earth-shattering secret. Every masterful tap dance and velvet vocal note was a calculated distraction, helping crime syndicates smoothly launder dirty money through upscale nightclub venues. Sammy was living a terrifying double life. The golden illusion of his immense wealth and fame masked a horrifying reality where he was constantly monitored, heavily indebted, and entirely trapped in a treacherous web he couldn't simply walk away from. The FBI aggressively tracked his every move for years, turning his daily existence into tabloid fodder and drawing relentless public disgrace from peers who couldn't comprehend his impossible choices. This relentless scrutiny caused an invisible enemy of intense paranoia to slowly consume his sanity. This toxic romance with the criminal underworld became a silent predator. Decades of suffocating stress and strict mob control ravaged his health, directly contributing to his agonizing decline and eventual death from cancer in 1990. The man who broke so many racial barriers died gasping for air, a tragic victim of a cruel system that demanded a piece of his soul in exchange for a forgiving spotlight. The true cost of Hollywood glory is ultimately measured in unfillable voids and absolute silence. Yet, while the neon-lit cages of Vegas demanded mob-sanctioned compromises from artists desperate for a stage, the blood-stained, freezing alleys of Chicago bred an entirely different breed of survivor, one who didn't just sing for the underworld, but actively orchestrated its daily chaos on the streets. Red Fox. The end came abruptly on a Hollywood soundstage in 1991, as a fatal heart attack struck down one of America's most influential comedic pioneers. He collapsed under the dazzling stage lights, gasping for air, while crew members tragically assumed it was just another classic physical gag. This was the sudden raw agony, the merciless foe that permanently silenced the legendary voice of Sanford & Son. But to truly understand the crushing toll on his heart, we must rewind from his picture-perfect family television legacy back to the freezing, blood-stained streets of 1940s Chicago. Long before fame, John Elroy Sanford was heavily trapped by the systemic blade of extreme poverty and relentless racial prejudices. Pushed into a brutal survival strategy, he didn't just dabble in crime. He became a hardened, respected enforcer within Chicago's vicious street gang networks. In an era offering zero opportunities, drug dealing, protection rackets, and armed theft became his daily reality. He narrowly survived intense gang turf wars in 1943, constantly dodging police sirens and rival gunfire in shadowy alleys. His numerous arrests for narcotics and assault weren't just future tabloid fodder. They were the bleeding scars of a man fighting an invisible enemy just to stay alive. Ironically, this terrifying double life unlocked the back doors to mob-controlled comedy clubs, the only stages where a street-hardened hustler could perform. His legendary raspy delivery and razor-sharp wit were forged directly in the unforgiving fire of the underworld. Yet, crippling tax debts and the undeniable shadows of his criminal past severely haunted his final years. The brightest flames of fame are often fueled by the most combustible secrets, leaving nothing but fleeting ash when the spotlight finally fades. Laughter, however, wasn't the only desperate distraction employed to drown out the menacing echoes of organized crime. Across the country, intoxicating jazz melodies were actively being weaponized to cast an elegant sonic veil over the ruthless realities of bootlegging syndicates. Cab Calloway. If you stood inside the suffocatingly packed, smoke-filled room of Harlem's infamous Cotton Club in the 1930s, the intoxicating energy would have paralyzed you. I remember watching him from the front row, an absolute powerhouse in a white zoot suit flawlessly commanding the room. But staring closely past the dazzling stage lights and the golden illusion of his infectious smile, you would immediately feel a creeping cold dread. The sharply dressed men quietly smoking cigars at the VIP tables weren't music enthusiasts. They were brutal mob overlords. Cab was living a terrifying double life. In an era entirely suffocated by vicious racial prejudices and invisible walls, the greatest performance venues were strictly locked away from black artists. Singing massive hits like Minnie the Moocher wasn't just art. It was a desperate survival strategy against the invisible punishment of a fiercely segregated America. He was forced into a toxic romance with the Harlem Mafia, serving as a mesmerizing, glittering distraction while the syndicates actively laundered massive bootlegging and gambling fortunes in the back rooms. The mob provided a necessary lethal shield from violent racist groups, but you could physically sense Fame's crushing pressure weighing heavily on his soul. It was an earth-shattering secret hiding in plain sight, a magnificent bird forced to sing inside a gilded, blood-stained cage. Although he eventually slipped away from their underworld grip in the 1950s, the psychological scars of performing for killers lingered until his passing in 1994. When the deafening applause finally faded and the heavy velvet curtains closed for the last time, the warm spotlight violently snapped off, leaving nothing but an echoing, pitch-black silence. A shuttered nightclub's shadows merely concealed the fading footprints of the Jazz-Age Mafia. An entirely different, permanent darkness was already waiting to swallow the soul of the next musical pioneer, an inescapable void behind sightless eyes where a chemical demon eagerly took the throne. Ray Charles. For a man living in perpetual physical darkness, the most terrifying shadows were never the ones he couldn't see, but the ones festering inside his own fractured psyche. The systemic blade of crushing poverty and relentless racial discrimination forged a brilliant soul icon, but it also bred a silent predator of unbearable trauma. Beneath the golden illusion of his legendary Grammys and timeless rhythm and blues hits, an invisible enemy was rapidly multiplying in his mind. Heroin wasn't just a chemical escape, it was a psychological ghost haunting his every waking moment. This overwhelming raw agony forced him into a harrowing double life within the criminal underworld of New York and Los Angeles. To secure his fix, he became deeply entangled with ruthless narcotic syndicates operating in the very clubs where he performed. He was a blind genius manipulated by unseen criminal handlers, constantly consumed by the terrifying paranoia of impending arrests and public disgrace. By the time law enforcement raided his life multiple times between 1958 and 1965, the illusion shattered. The crippling withdrawal during his desperate 1965 rehab stint left him physically trembling and gasping for air, revealing the true depth of his wasting away. Although he heroically beat the addiction and survived until 2004, the agonizing reality remains that his purest innocence had already perished under the needle decades before his physical body finally collapsed. A needle's lethal pierce silently drained the lifeblood of a music legend behind closed doors. Out in the glaring arena lights, the brutal shedding of human blood was actively commodified, transformed into a multi-million-dollar empire orchestrated by a ruthless street enforcer who seamlessly traded back-alley extortion for heavyweight championship belts. Don King. Imagine the blinding flashbulbs of a historic heavyweight championship, with multi-million-dollar contracts signed alongside legends like Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. Don King stood at the absolute pinnacle of sports entertainment, a powerhouse wrapped in the golden illusion of the ultimate American dream. Yet, this monumental triumph presents a chilling paradox. Beneath the dazzling stage lights and the charismatic grins lay a foundation cemented entirely by raw agony and extreme violence. Long before the deafening arena cheers, King was the ruthless architect of Cleveland's darkest street crimes during the 1950s and 1960s. Pushed to the margins by the systemic blade of harsh poverty and vicious racial discrimination, he didn't just survive, he violently dominated. He became a terrifying underworld kingpin, orchestrating massive illegal gambling rings and brutal protection rackets. The sudden drop into undeniable reality occurred in 1967, permanently shattering his untouchable facade. King was convicted of manslaughter after literally beating a debtor to death in the streets, a merciless foe enforcing underworld debts, resulting in 4 grueling years behind bars. Even after transforming into a global boxing mogul, the invisible enemy of the FBI continuously tracked his deep, lingering ties to organized crime and mafia syndicates. his legendary career remained a toxic romance with hidden greed and terrifying underworld power. When every shining championship belt is fundamentally laced with the dark ghosts of back-alley extortion, what is the actual worth of a glittering legacy forged in blood? A diamond-studded promoter's jacket could barely conceal the brass knuckles of a hardened street enforcer. Yet, miles away, immaculate tailored suits were actively providing an entirely flawless disguise for a politician secretly ruling Harlem's vast underworld strictly through legislative power. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Look closely at any 1950s archival photo of Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., and you will immediately notice the immaculate, razor-sharp lapels of his custom-tailored suits. It was a visual armor of absolute perfection. But if you zoom in on the breast pocket, you aren't just looking at expensive silk. You are staring directly at a meticulously crafted golden illusion designed to conceal thick envelopes of illicit cash. As a towering icon and one of the first black men to wield immense political power in Congress, Powell was widely revered as a flawless civil rights champion. However, the systemic blade of 1940s Harlem dictated that true dominance wasn't solely won at the ballot box. It was fiercely negotiated in the shadows of the criminal underworld. Driven by fame's crushing pressure and a desperate survival strategy, Powell fully embraced a terrifying double life. He weaponized his legislative influence to actively shield violent gambling rings and narcotic networks. In exchange for the mob's brutal protection against racist adversaries and political rivals, he cemented a toxic romance with vicious crime syndicates. He wasn't just a passive bystander. He effectively operated as their political kingpin. The illusion shattered spectacularly in 1960 when federal tax evasion charges violently exposed his deeply buried earth-shattering secret. The FBI, acting as a relentless invisible enemy, meticulously tracked his illicit campaign funds and systematically dismantled his carefully constructed empire. Facing relentless public disgrace and the crushing fear of stigma, his final years were spent tragically wasting away in exile, a fallen hero inextricably bound to the very thugs he once protected. The ultimate truth remains chillingly simple. A bespoke suit can temporarily disguise a corrupt soul, but it can never launder the blood money lining its pockets. A politician's heavy wooden gavel forcefully struck in New York could flawlessly orchestrate an invisible shield of underworld protection. Yet, across the country in the brutally hostile jazz lounges of Chicago, an entirely different kind of artist would soon discover that a mesmerizing voice meant absolutely nothing without the violent blessing of a mafia enforcer. Nat King Cole. If you were the chrome microphone standing center stage in 1940s Chicago, you would have felt two distinctly different vibrations. Through the wire, you transmitted the impossibly warm, soulful vocals that crowned him an absolute icon and a legendary television pioneer. But through the cold metal bass, you could physically feel his trembling hands. A visceral, silent reaction to the terrifying double life he was forced to endure. Beneath the dazzling stage lights, the systemic blade of suffocating racial prejudices ensured that every major entertainment venue was securely locked behind the invisible walls of mafia control. To simply perform, Nat King Cole had to adopt a desperate survival strategy, stepping directly into a toxic romance with the city's most ruthless crime syndicates. I witnessed the earth-shattering secret meticulously hidden behind his gentle, signature smile. When vicious racist mobs physically assaulted him on stage in 1956, leaving him in absolute raw agony, the authorities did absolutely nothing. His very survival depended entirely on the brutal mob enforcers lurking in the theater's shadows. This dark underworld shield provided a necessary forgiving spotlight, but it demanded absolute obedience, acting as an invisible enemy that strictly monitored his every move. His 1946 arrest for marijuana was just a brief flash of tabloid fodder, barely scratching the surface of his deeply guarded criminal entanglement. When cancer finally arrived as a merciless foe in 1965, leaving him tragically gasping for air, the beautiful melodies stopped forever. The cold microphone was violently unplugged, left to stand in deafening silence on a stage permanently haunted by the heavy price of fame. Yet that era's organized terror merely evolved. Trading the smoke-filled, mafia-controlled jazz lounges of Chicago for the sun-scorched, blood-soaked concrete of South Los Angeles completely rewrote the rules of survival. The quiet extortion of suited mob bosses was violently replaced by the chaotic, deafening crossfire of teenage street soldiers fighting for their lives. A single, desperate choice can permanently dictate the entire trajectory of a human life. For a deeply impoverished, orphan teenager named Tracy Merrow in 1970s South Los Angeles, deciding to align with the notorious Crips gang wasn't born of malice. it was a devastatingly necessary survival strategy. The systemic blade of extreme poverty and institutional neglect left him completely defenseless in a brutal underworld where power was measured strictly in bullets and ruthlessness. That one fateful decision to don the gang's colors created a violent ripple effect, pulling him deep into a terrifying vortex of armed theft, drug dealing, and bloody turf wars to claim status. He constructed the golden illusion of a fearless street kingpin, commanding absolute respect in the slums. Yet, behind this hardened gangland persona lay an earth-shattering secret: the overwhelming raw agony of a lonely child desperately trying to mask an unfillable void left by early loss. The streets rapidly became a silent predator, where relentless psychological pressure and the daily threat of being gunned down by rival bloods haunted his every step. This toxic romance with gang life nearly became a fatal trap, threatening to permanently erase his future before it even began. Realizing this path only led to a cemetery or a prison cell, he made another monumental choice: escaping the underworld in the late 1970s to join the army, eventually channeling his gritty experiences into pioneering gangsta rap and starring in Law and Order, SVU. His survival stands as a chilling warning about the absolute fragility of life in the ghetto, where one wrong step can quickly seal a death sentence. A blue bandana tied tightly around an orphan's neck in the 70s eventually morphed into a globally monetized hip-hop uniform by the 90s, as the exact same brutal street allegiances prepared to catapult another teenage hustler straight from the blood-soaked concrete of Long Beach into multi-platinum superstardom. Snoop Dogg. In November 1993, the world witnessed an absolute musical powerhouse shatter Billboard records as the legendary album Doggy Style debuted at number 1, cementing Calvin Broadus Jr. as a global rap icon. He was basking in a magnificent golden illusion of unimaginable wealth, millions of adoring fans, and absolute cultural dominance. Yet the sudden drop arrived with terrifying, breathtaking speed. At the exact moment his commercial crown was secured, Snoop Dogg was fiercely fighting for his life and freedom in a Los Angeles courtroom, heavily implicated in a horrifying 1993 murder case. The blinding flashes of Hollywood paparazzi cameras brutally collided with the flashing red and blue sirens of his incredibly dark reality. This was the terrifying paradox of his monumental peak. Long before the multi-platinum plaques, Snoop was deeply trapped by the systemic blade of extreme poverty in East Long Beach, a suffocating environment that offered absolutely zero choices. To avoid becoming a defenseless target, he adopted a desperate, violent survival strategy by actively pledging to the notorious Rollin' 20s Crips. His chaotic teenage years were an endless cycle of drug dealing, carrying illegal weapons, and engaging in brutal street brawls. The gang syndicate provided a necessary violent shield, but it also completely masked the raw agony of a lost youth entirely devoid of opportunity. Even as he rapidly ascended to Hollywood royalty alongside Dr. Dre, his deeply rooted criminal ties threatened to become a merciless foe. The explosive murder charge was a terrifying, earth-shattering secret that nearly locked him away forever, exposing the relentless tabloid fodder of a man who was still an active target in the bloody, citywide Crips Bloods war. Although he was ultimately acquitted on self-defense and bravely pivoted to a brilliant, diversified career in acting and television hosting, the immense psychological trauma of those violent days left indelible, permanent scars. When a shining platinum record on the wall is inextricably tied to a bloody chalk outline on the pavement, what is the true price of reaching the highest summit if you must constantly look over your shoulder? A judge's heavy wooden gavel might have miraculously cleared one rap prodigy's name in a tense, claustrophobic courtroom, but just a few hundred miles east across the desert, an unforgiving hail of drive-by bullets was rapidly preparing to execute a much darker, irreversible verdict on the undisputed king of the hip-hop generation. Tupac Shakur. 25 years of life. Over 75 million records sold globally. 5 bullets narrowly survived during a terrifying 1994 New York studio ambush. But the only statistic that truly dictated his tragic legacy was the final 4 fatal rounds that violently tore through a Las Vegas intersection on September 13, 1996. The sudden drop of Tupac Shakur wasn't a random accident. It was a brutal mathematical certainty in a life entirely consumed by the streets. As an unparalleled rap icon and cultural powerhouse, Tupac brilliantly voiced the fiery rage of a neglected generation. But beneath the golden illusion of his multi-platinum plaques and blinding Hollywood fame, the systemic blade of 1990s Los Angeles had already trapped him behind impenetrable invisible walls. In a chaotic city overflowing with extreme poverty and systemic racism, aligning tightly with the notorious Bloods wasn't merely a character aesthetic. It was a desperate survival strategy against a relentless invisible enemy. Tupac lived a highly dangerous double life. His deep, lucrative ties to Suge Knight and Death Row Records generated immense financial power, but they simultaneously cemented a toxic romance with a terrifying criminal underworld. Every aggressive lyric was forged in the raw agony of deadly gangland shootouts. Fame's crushing pressure only amplified the violence, transforming his deeply personal street wars into international tabloid fodder during the vicious East-West Coast hip-hop feud. The illusion shattered when the hardened persona he actively weaponized as a shield ultimately became the very silent predator that hunted him down. He perished before he could ever truly escape the shadows, actively monetized by the very industry that watched him bleed. The ultimate, devastating equation of his legacy remains painfully clear. Boundless poetic genius multiplied by inescapable gangland warfare equals an unfillable void at merely a quarter of a century old. While a catastrophic hail of gunfire in the neon desert permanently silenced the blood's most mesmerizing poet, an equally devastating symphony of survival was simultaneously echoing from the neighboring, sun-baked concrete of Compton, where the rival Crips had meticulously molded another lost youth into the haunted architect of a gangster's paradise. Julio. Look closely at the cold, sterile bathroom tiles of a Los Angeles home in September 2022. Just inches from the lifeless body of a 1990s hip-hop powerhouse lay the invisible remnants of a merciless foe. Before this raw agony, Leon Ivy Jr. lived within a golden illusion, riding the unprecedented global wave of gangsta's paradise. Yet, long before the dazzling stage lights and Hollywood cameos, he was trapped behind the invisible walls of 1980s Compton. In a city dominated by the Crips, dealing drugs and carrying illegal weapons wasn't a choice. It was a desperate survival strategy to navigate severe racial prejudices and poverty. He was a vital cog in an underground machine, his double life demanding blood and absolute loyalty. To the world, his Grammy-winning success seemed like a picture-perfect escape from the streets. However, the systemic blade of his past never truly stopped swinging. The fear of stigma and the unfillable void left by gangland trauma morphed into a silent predator. Even as he traded drive-by shootings for glamorous red carpets, the chilling speculation about his enduring addictions lingered. The sudden drop came tragically when a fatal fentanyl overdose became his invisible executioner, an earth-shattering secret that finally brought down a man who had survived decades of literal crossfire. The very environment that forged his iconic voice had planted the seeds of his demise, transforming his hard-earned success into ultimate tabloid fodder. The brutal truth remains: you can walk out of the gangster's paradise, but the paradise never truly walks out of you. The blinding glare of Hollywood's golden illusion can never completely bleach away the bloodstains of the past. These 11 legends didn't just chase fame, they desperately outran the systemic blade of poverty and prejudice. Behind every standing ovation lies a profound survival strategy and raw agony that the cameras were too blind to capture. So, did this shattering of the picture-perfect myth change how you view your idols? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you crave more earth-shattering secrets behind the dazzling stage lights, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We are just getting started.